Okay, welcome to the first roundtable of Real Pioneering. I am Este, and this is the new channel, the new Telegram channel of Real Pioneering. And tonight we will speak about my last article that I published on Facebook and through our free community on the website of Real Pioneering. And this article is just an exploration of an idea, and it starts from a simple observation. And the observation is this. The observation is regarding the social networks. And specifically, I observed that the new social networks that we have also since many years, of course, like Facebook, like Instagram, and Twitter, and so on, are social networks that allows people to connect and upload content, posts, photo, video, and so on. So when these social networks were created, who created them just connected to the idea and to the representation of allowing people to connect between each other. But this is just one of the possible representations that we can have. And in that article that I posted, I just started to explore one of the possible new representation that we can have. So in this world, I will do a little bit of introduction. In the world that we live in, we are constantly dealing with representations. A society itself is a representation. And I can say, surely, that nowadays, and also in the past it was more problematic than that today, we have kind of a huge gap in the representations. And so people go in their day-to-day life, day-to-day jobs, routines, and so on, day-to-day also problems, day-to-day inspirations and ideas. And they just try to navigate in life, in a planet, and they just they simply are trying to have the best representations or the best representation of who they perceive they are, who they perceive they can do, the actions that they can actualize, the potentials that they can have, the expressions that they can share to the world. So we live constantly in this process of representation. And so the roundtable of tonight is also an opportunity to introduce you to this concept. And this concept, it will be also one of the main topic I will cover in the new annual and the first annual series of Real Pioneering. It will be kind of a monthly production of materials that cover this exploration about representation and many other things. So people, where do they get inspired by representations? they get inspired by seeing, for example, their parents, the examples that they receive from their parents, the examples that they receive in schools from peers, other girls and boys, kids. They get representation from films, they get representation from books, and they get representation from social media networks. And the problem that there is today is that when you go on the social media, suddenly, probably, it depends by the individual, of course. When you go on social media, you can get lost in a representation that is disconnected from the real world or from the planet itself, from nature, for example. So when you go inside this social network, you can get lost, or you can get reconnected to nature. For example, if you are watching a documentary about nature, about, for example, hiking in the mountains, and so on. So the representation is something that is very important in the process of self-awareness and the self-image that you are creating and yet you are representing about yourself. And think about it from a more profound and larger perspective. And think about your divine presence, your soul, your light, your I am. You can call it in the way you want. And feel for a moment. So, an extended light of this presence, this I am, is now embodied in a planet. And so, what representation can have? Feel it for a moment. Feel the beauty of just embodying in a new territory called planet Earth, where you can discover a representation about yourself. Feel it another bit. It's just the beauty of stopping for one moment and start to look at the level, the world of representations that are called also archetypes. And while you feel it, you can also start to feel the representation that is always transmitted by your presence. And this is called the divine representation, the divine image. So how many examples we have of this embodied here? And in which ways? With which stories? So my perception is that humanity itself, it will start to become aware of the world of representations. It will start to become aware that, for example, politics or the banking systems sometimes doesn't have an equivalent representation of them in nature. And so if the humanity wants to evolve, it has to start to observe nature, for example, or inside themselves, the Christic nature of themselves. We have to start to observe how nature works, how nature is representing beauty, how nature is, for example, representing connections between trees, how nature is creating a representation of the water cycle, for example. So the human side of, or the external human side of our being is able to create this type of representations or human creations that are not literally representing our nature, our divine nature. So, for example, let's imagine now, let's go a little bit more practical. Let's imagine now a new type of social network, a new type of web application, or simply an app on your phone that when you go inside it, the architecture of this app is representing, for example, the natural world. Or another example is that this app can represent the architecture of the city you are living in. And so this requires certainly a new effort in imagination, a new effort in creating new models of representation. Because now we have, for example, internet. In the internet, the first representation that started internet, it was like sending a message to one part of the world to the other, and it's really a big accomplishment. And the representation of it is being able to make people communicate instantly, besides distance, physical distance, physical space. But literally, there are also other functions that internet introduced. Internet introduced you to being able to represent your individual expression and let it know to the world beyond the physical limits of a community, a local community that you live in. And this is great. But at the same time, it's like internet is becoming aware, internet and the people that works with technology are becoming aware that this first representation that presented the internet, that presented this functionality inside the internet, forget about the local communities, for example. And so the community's feature, the community tools are starting to appear. An example of it is the new community feature inside the WhatsApp that allows to have a community with many groups, and this community can be used for local communities or for schools where every classroom have a group and the parents can talk to each other and so on. This is just one of the new examples. But I also saw today that also on Telegram, especially in groups, not in channels yet, but in groups in Telegram, you can have a group with different topics. So one of the trends that I'm seeing and that is is needed for the future is being able to have online tools or technological tools of communication that you are able to model to represent what is your idea of communication. And the idea of communication that I talked about in my article was the idea of um, having a new tool that allows people to um, allows the voice of people to be heard, to be seen. Another problem that we have is the disconnection between the model, the representation that politics and the institutions live in, and the representation and the tools that the people, the population, have to be in contact, in communication with these institutions. So there are some ways of communication, of course. I made the example of the electoral vote, or you can have communication with the local institution, with the local meetings with the mayor of a city. I guess that they are made monthly. Also here are made monthly. So this is one of the ways, but we need uh, more faster ways of communication, and also we need a new type of representation that is including the voice of people, because I guess the governments, institutions, social media networks, of course, they have big data, big charts that represents the preference of people about some topics. But people cannot express their preference in a very visible way. The communication that we have now is that everybody has his own channel, for example, of communication. It can be a Facebook profile, it can be a channel on YouTube. Everybody is speaking, is expressing, is uploading content, but we don't have, as a people, a tool to make visible the preference of people. Of course, there are um, many things that can be said about it. And so the idea I had it was for example to have this new tool where there are only polls, uh, posts with options where people can vote instantly in any topic, and the polls can be created by anyone. And so inside this tool, you can have um, the trending polls. You can have the polls of about your city, and of course, the challenges is that inside this uh, type of new application uh, that is based on polls, uh, you need to have only real accounts, not fake accounts, of course. So you need to have a registration inside it to not have polls that are not representing the real preference of the real people. So it's like people taking a bit of responsibility of making visible their preference. But this doesn't mean, for example, if your state, your country wants or not to install nuclear, for example, nuclear production of energy. Of course, the people can vote, but how do we know if the people that is voting is very aware of this technology or not? So of course, we need we still need technicians, representatives that take in account, of course, the preference of people, but then they have kind of a roundtable where they decide more in detail. So the voice of people that is represented doesn't have to be something um, that is an obstacle to the fluidity of decisions. And so another point I touched in my post was about the central level of decisions. When you have a central level of decisions, meaning that you have decisions in the hands of very few people, and they are deciding for a lot of people, sometimes there is a problem if there is not awareness in these people or there is corruption. So when you make visible the voice of people, you are moving, you are switching, you're making visible a new level of decisions. So the decisions is not only in the um, hands of the few, but are making visible also the preference of people and how the world can be modeled more faster if the preference of people is seen. Just think about it. I want to ask now to Dorothea and Verena, what do you think about this concept of representation and this concept of making visible the choices, the voices of people, and the impact that this can have on essentially on power in the hands of very few people, What do you think about it? Let's start with Verena.
So, if I have understood you right, you mean that there must be social medias who make more publish the opinion of the people with opinion polls or something like this.
Yes,
Yeah, I
this
have
is
asked you
the concept. It is the one of the ways, of course, that you
another
can.
way.
Yes,
Okay.
it's the way I had in kind of my vision, but of course, it's just at the beginning.
One, okay. Hmm. One question that pops up inside of me is the are humanity really mature enough to take responsibility? Of course, everybody can take his opinion or can make visible and the opinion, but how is the opinion? You know what I mean? Um, Leaded by a sort of egoism or by the to come from a not from the source that really think for the community, but more for personal options. You know what I mean? This was one question because it just exists also on Facebook, on Telegram. I see that the opinion polls exist, and sometimes I ask me on which parameters or preferences the people decided. Yeah, is it really for the good of all, or if it's for the good of myself in a way? You know what I mean?
Can I answer now? Then you can have another question. To me, is a process. Um, Without it, you never have people taking responsibility. So there is also always these people delegating to one of the parties that are representations, that are ideologies, and this is for me part of the process of taking responsibility, because especially in the young ones, uh, when you know that you can have a voice, um, and participate in something, this create a kind of passion, uh, especially in the young ones, but also in the other ones, to dive more and be more aware of the topics, and so to understand better the world that they live in. Because, as I said at the beginning, we kind of have this um scarcity of representations of the world, because we can have um, many types of representation, but it doesn't mean that these representations makes us more aware of the world, of the energies, of how community works. Because, for example, when the human was at the beginning of itself, in a way, uh, of course, the human was living in little communities, not in big city, and they were walking in the street without smartphones, and so they were looking around how the community works. So the community was organized more for me in a natural way, and the connection that people was having with nature around was more intense, because they were relying to it. um, and my point is, we don't have to make again this connection with nature by relying on it, but of course by expecting, by exploring, by uh, knowing how Earth works, and so on. And this is, of course, um, a process. While in the world that we live in, you can see that people often have this feeling of disconnection, and this can have two results. It can go more deeper in disconnection and being lost, or it can inspire you to find new meanings in life, or to know you better, and be being your awakening. For example, I replied to your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, if it's corresponding really to a process that the people, or especially also the young ones, went into a let me say a process of responsibility and also evolving. Yeah, it sounds fantastic. Yeah, it sounds fascinating, these ideas that you have. And yes, perhaps now the time is there to go back. And what's really fascinating me was when you talk, okay, there are systems, not only in social medias, that but also like bank system, that are not corresponding to nature, and that we study more nature, how this is communicating. Or also inside of me was this Fibonacci spiral. Yes. And yeah, really to study the rules of nature more, and also to transfer it also to social medias. This was very fascinating, this new thought to me. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Wow.
Thank you. Okay, before I talk another point, I want to hear from Dorothea. Did you like what we are exploring? If you have questions, or let's see.
Yes, I like it. I think if you start to communicate with nature, it's for many people a little bit. It seems that you are wired, that you are not normal. You know what I mean? You're crazy. Yes, if you
Yes,
start.
yes.
and and I
Can I
think
interrupt? Can I for a moment? Yes, and this craziness is a problem of representation,
yes,
because they don't understand that representation, and the only way they have to understand it is to represent it as crazy.
as created, yes,
As crazy. They have, you
as crazy created, yes.
yes, yes. Go on, please.
um I think when you look from the standpoint that all is quantum, that all is energy, um, that you can communicate without any words, without any, from the human standpoint, without to see any picture, then it's for most of the people, yes, it's also crazy. So it's the same like trees do communicate with each other, or flowers, or the animals communicate with us, or the animals communicate with the grass they eat. They all communicate. And I think it's it's a little bit difficult for us to transfer this to channels that the normal, sorry for the word, human did understand. You know what I mean?
Yes, and also this is part of the process of evolution of the human race as a whole. And of course, there are, uh, as always, first two or three people that discover it. I mean, a very small number of people that starts it, then the masses comes after it. So
Hmm.
is of course like this. For example, we are four people now. We are and what you're talking about the communication that you have with nature, or the communication you have with animals, or the communication the animals have with nature itself, are not so much represented, are not so much uh, told in many ways. And and so people can of course start to search about it, because on internet you can find someone that talks about it, of course, but this representation is not mainstream.
No.
No. And for example, uh, if we want to talk about the young ones and the education that they receive, the education that they receive often, more often in the past, maybe now is starting to change, they are not receiving representations, instructions, for example, on how to connect on a deep level with another human being, and what this mean, what this creates, and so on. So, of course, there are people that are talking about it, especially in the spiritual community, for example, but also in many other things, in business and so on. But you have also you have to be able to see in which representation that they are doing it, because if they do it, for example, only for business purpose, for example, how you connect with your customers. I know, for example, in marketings, funnels, and so on, there is a lot of this, and they use um, a type of representation, but is just for for a purpose and not for the general representation of it. But of course, also inside it, there are people that maybe start with these techniques, for example, of relating to other people, or telling stories to other people, like storytelling, and then they discover that is more than that. There is more to it, and so we really need more representations. And of course, now with mm, general film industries like Netflix and so on, people are accessing more rapidly more types of representations. But this doesn't just have to be inside films. It can be inside tools of communication, social media of communication. And so you start to see that this social media starts to have a different type of architecture that maybe allows you not just to connect or to have the possibility of connecting, but to develop a deeper connection. And of course, when these social media networks like Facebook and so on have been created, the main scope, the main purpose was to make people being able to have the access to this connection. They, I guess, they didn't thought about these tools as something that allows a deeper connection between people. And what this mean? What interfaces do you have to create, for example? Or what reminders do you have to create? Just, for example, not to, to talk to somebody just via chat, but also to meet. So, of course, this thing depends also on the individual. But if we have also representations around us in many fields, also in education, as I said, it becomes more easy for the people to not represent something that they don't understand initially as crazy, as outside of their representation. So one point, for example, to know that you are not crazy is to know, of course, that there are other people that are having the same inspirations, ideas, and so on. And part of the social media networks have done it, and it is really great. But it can be done more. And for example, another type of representation that you can give to the young ones in schools, it can be about the studies of how, for example, a sustainable community works. And I know that there is someone that is starting to do it, and it is called kind of, if I remember well, geospatial awareness in education, where um, they give the students, especially in, in elementary and also after that, I don't know the English term, they give them the informations about the communities they live in, like what is the production of this thing inside this city, of this uh, product, of this, for example, of tomato, or what is the evolution of the natural areas around our city in deforestation and so on. So the students start to have a spatial awareness, a representation of the environment they live in. Because if they don't have it, they don't care. Because they don't have the information to elaborate new ideas. So if somebody is curious about it, I can send the link. I can find it again. So this was the core topic of my article. Essentially, I talked about the idea of a new tool for the voice of people, and this allows also to not have centralized decisions or decisions that are not caring about the people. Because we can say that democracy and the the politicians that are elected are there to make the interests of people, but how do they know if they are always busy with political meetings, for example? And I don't know if this is said in other part of the world, but I guess so. Here in Italy, for example, there are ex-politicians that are talking about um, the craziness of the places where the government works, because it's like a closed space that doesn't have many contacts with the environment around. So they always receive communication in a slower way, and they are based on just representations that doesn't care about the deep human nature of the citizens and the people of the country. So we need, of course, new model of representation. So also who is in these positions can can be more aware of the world they live in, because it doesn't mean that if they are in this high status position doesn't mean that they know the world better or how the world works. So Verena, you had another question.
No, I don't have had another question,
Uh,
but absolutely fascinating. And I agree absolutely that we need other tools also to represent the voice of the people. And so
yes,
thank you very much for
in
your
thank
insight.
you.
Cool topic to dive in and to explore. Yeah, thank you for giving this idea.
Yes, and for example, also, I mean, we can start to illuminate also the representation in which politics is working. For example, the left and the right, uh, Republicans and Democrats. And I'm not a political expert, but I can see um, one of the problems there, of course. One of the problems is about representation, and the people, even if we are in a representative democracy, the problem is that they don't feel represented, and so the people say, look at this. The people say we don't feel represented by politics or politicians, but they are still at a larger scale not aware of the representation problem, because they are not looking about um, how representation really works, because it was literally in our also education not contemplated so much to give you the tools to explore new types of representation and to understand the world, because representation essentially is understanding the world. And so people can have a mental image of the world that is um, not so much accurate, or it can be too much in duality, for example. So a thing that we will do with this new annual series it will be to create, to be inspired by new type of representations that have the ability to envelop the world in a new light, essentially, in a new light of representation, where also the people that are always thinking, focusing in a lower representation or in a lower vibration, um, a bad representation, a evil representation, can also start to have different images in them and essentially different feelings in them, and a new vibration that is arising as a consequence of this new awareness of what the world can be and what the world is not just a potential, is a way of looking at the world. So representations are and the images, the vision that you have is of course part of your perception of the world, and is part, of course, also of your way of shining and illuminating the world itself, because you are seeing it in your eyes. You're not just interpreting it through old representation or old model. And this is also one of the function of my book, to present a new model of representations, feelings, sensorial properties, where you can start to see through your body and to your body with a new divine representation of it. And we will talk about it more with Verena soon. Thank you. So thank you also to Ela. I don't know if you both, Verena or Dorothea, have new insights, other things that you want to say. We can talk about it. Verena?
Not yet. I must think a little bit about this because this
Mhm.
is new, the insights.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just started to talk and I didn't prepare so much what I was talking about, but it just flowed, so it's perfect. And Dorothea?
Absolutely.
Dorothea, you have the microphone muted.
I also have to feel a little bit in your thinking, in your feelings, in your yes, in your awareness what all can be happen in the future. I have to open my heart, my being, my light, and I think it's that people can communicate and join each other, not in these old matters, but in new matters. I think it's like a little girl or like a little child, like little children. They have to communicate, and we have perhaps the possibility to show them the way.
Exactly. And it is, of course, as I already said, part of the evolution of humanity. And as we are transitioning, hopefully soon, in a peaceful planet, the representations about wars between countries, between ideologies also, and values start to cease to exist, start to terminate and dissolve. So you start to have time to contemplate a new type of interpretation of life that of course until now was done essentially by individuals or small groups of pioneers. Um, but I hope that with this discussion around table, we are starting to give the real importance, the real value to uh, to the representation, to the concept of representation. What does it mean? What consequence it has? Because it's literally inviting you to have a new way of thinking. And for example, this concept of representation is, of course, present in theaters, in in operas that involves people to act. In the films, we already said it, in the books and so on. But it can start to be a kind of a thinking process or a self-awareness that people have daily about the representation of their life that they live in, the representation of the community that they have about the community around them, the representation to the individual. The representation can have literally an effect of awakening and of seeing how you process informations and how you perceive the environment and the world around you. And these, of course, are also topics that I'm covering with the exploration of live streamers that we are still currently doing. Is our annual exploration, while instead the annual series it will be something different that is covered monthly. Is not an exploration itself. It can have moments of exploration, but it has more like episodes in it that move forward. And so, said the importance of the representation. Uh, we can see that these have a deep impact on how the communication can be done also in technology or through technology. And the representation can be a tool to explore new frontiers, of course, in communication. And this was the title of our roundtable. So, say this, it was 1 hour long, maybe more. No, it was exactly kind of 1 hour. And last words of greetings, and then we have done it. Thank you so much from my part to Ela, to Verena and Dorothea. And if Verena and Dorothea want to say a greeting, you're welcome. Okay, first Verena.
Only to say a very deep thank you to you to open this roundtable and to give new insights. And yeah, thank you.
hope to do more in the future and see how it evolves. Thank you, Verena. Dorothea,
Yes, thank you very much, Esther, for
thank
this
you.
new for new thinkings. Thank you
Yes,
very much.
it's very important to be aware of how we think.
Yes,
Thank you so much
thank
to
you.
everybody, and have a good evening. Thank you so much.
You too.
Thank you too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.